Welcome back to Off the Pitch, the podcast where we chat with individuals working within and shaping the game of soccer from off the pitch. In this episode, we're joined by Steven Aldrich. Steven is an investor and the chair of USL Championship side, Oakland Roots. Steven shares what the journey has been like so far for the club, going from simply being an idea to a sold-out home opener crowd, and he also filled us in on what it's like to change leagues, as Oakland have gone from NISA to the USL Championship. We spoke a lot about the ownership of the club, and that's because this includes people like Marshawn, Lynch, G-Easy, Billy Joe Armstrong, Jason Kidd, but also most importantly, the addition of over 5,000 new owners in the community investment round that brought in over $3 million. This episode is truly filled with a lot of golden nuggets, and Steven is clearly someone that's leading from the heart. I know that you're going to enjoy this one. So with that said, let's get into the episode. All right, Steven, thank you again so much for sharing some time with us today and being willing to come on the show. Obviously, David and I now know a bit about yourself and your background, both in sport and outside of sport, which you can get into yourself. But for anyone that doesn't know who you are, do you mind just giving a bit of a rundown on who Steven Aldrich is as a person and also what your kind of professional career has looked like so far?
Yeah, absolutely. David and Matt, thanks so much for having me on the show. So Steven Aldrich, chair of the Oakland Roots and the Oakland Soul SC, and was super excited when the founding team at the Roots reached out back in 2018. They had seen that I am both a soccer player, a goalkeeper, still playing, although older and slower and certainly not better than I was when I was younger. I've been an entrepreneur in the tech world and also done social impact work, in particular around the arts in the Bay Area. And so those three things led to the Roots reaching out, and we'll tell you that story in a bit. But I've been really excited to be able to bring different threads of my life together. So I've been out in the Bay Area now for a while, and the ability to make an impact in people's lives and do community-driven work, whether it's for profit or not for profit, and in this case, to bring both together has been exciting. And for me, the idea of sport and business and community all together was something that really captivated me, given all the stuff that led up to what I'm doing now with the Roots and the Soul.
That's awesome. So I know you mentioned you were and still are a goalkeeper. So what does your personal impact and introduction with soccer look like? Obviously now you're in it in a professional standpoint in the business side, but what did that look like as Steven Aldrich, the soccer player growing up?
Let's see. I grew up playing multiple sports, and I gravitated towards soccer and basketball when my folks decided it was too cold in upstate New York, and hockey therefore was out. And so we wound up in the South. The focus was soccer and basketball. And as I was going through high school, was more and more focused on soccer, and spent one summer coaching at the UNC soccer camp, which was super fun, and went to Carolina intending to play soccer for the Heels. And this was a long time ago. So at the time, Anson Dorrance was both the men's and the women's coach. And we had 3-a-days. I don't know if you can still do 3-a-days. We had 3-a-days in the preseason when I was a freshman. And when I was on campus early and going to practice, I thought through, is this really what my collegiate experience is going to look like? And had a little bit of an injury, and was spending time before and after every practice in the training room. And ultimately, during the preseason, called Coach Dorrance and said I wasn't going to play. And he said, "Today's the team picture. Are you sure?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm not going to play." Interestingly, I wound up becoming a varsity athlete in fencing, which is a whole nother story. So I spent 4 years on the fencing team, which took even more time than if I had continued to play soccer. But sometimes things work out in strange ways. And went back to soccer in graduate school when I moved to California. So played for a club team out here that went up and down the Bay Area and played in local men's leagues. So came back to soccer and stopped again when business got too busy. And then as our son started to play soccer, was in the backyard and spending a lot of time with him. And someone saw me at drop off one day, and I still haven't figured out how they learned this, but they yelled, "Hey, Steven, I heard you're a goalkeeper. We need someone for our Sunday league." And so sure enough, I pulled the gloves out and started playing again. And that was about 15 years ago. So it's been a fun, lifelong journey with the sport. And the beautiful thing about being a goalkeeper, and now I'm old, right? I'm in my 50s, is it's something that you can continue to do as long as you stay relatively your limbs can stay attached. But I'm not that fast. I'm not able to jump anymore, but positioning counts for a lot. And so I hope to continue to play for a while to come.
Awesome.
And
That's great.
I do not get in the goal with the guys in practice, or the women in practice for that matter. That is not something that I'm equipped to go do.
You just have the mobility for a game, and that's where the line is drawn. That's great.
Exactly. Yeah. Do I come home in one piece, all limbs attached? If so, success.
Yeah. So I know you mentioned the founding group kind of reached out to you at the beginning of the journey for the Roots. So can you take us back to that kind of day one conversation of what was being pitched to you, what made you want to be a part of it, and then kind of what that process looked like going from just, a bit of an idea to actually then 11 players on a field selling out the home crowd in the first game?
Yeah, that's a great question, Matt. It was interesting because the kernel of the idea that the founding group had, even back in 2018, was very much intact. Like, the idea was, how do you take the magic of Oakland and the power of sport and use those two things for social good? I mean, that tagline, that concept, came from the founding group from day one. And that has been the thread that has been consistent all the way through. And the questions I started to ask that summer of 2018 were, how do you take that idea on paper and turn it into a business, turn it into something that can be self-sustaining, and then some of the practical logistics around infrastructure. So to have a team, you need a place to practice. To have a team, you need a place to play. To have a team, you need a league. We're not going to be the Harlem Globetrotters of soccer. Like, how do all these things come together? And it took the summer and the fall to really sort through, what those answers might be. And even there, by the time 2018 had finished, the Roots were still a brand versus any of the other components. And so we had just started to work on getting a license to play in a league. And the first license we looked at was in the NPSL. The question then was, well, what pro league might we join? And the choices were few. And where might we play? And again, there was no site in Oakland that was a sanctionable, ready to play soccer pitch and stadium. And so that took the better part of early 2019. And at that point, I had left GoDaddy and had joined as the pro bono full-time chair for the Roots, working with the founding team. And so I wound up taking on some of the negotiation around the venue, work with the founders on what league might we join, because I could basically take that off their plates, get their input, and make things happen. But the founding team really did a good job of building all the other components of the decisions and the community support that has just been so critical, then and now. So how do you go from an idea on paper to actually having a team? Infrastructure is non-trivial, and we're still working through those. Maybe we'll talk about that a bit later on in the conversation. But those were the early days of take the idea and how can you go from this beautiful, interesting concept to the reality of 11 people on the pitch ready to go with fans watching, and hopefully revenues coming in to at least offset some of those costs along the way.
Yeah, some. And on that note of the fans, as I mentioned, that the first game seemed to be a sellout, but I also read that all 4 of the first season's home games were all sellout crowds. So as someone who I mentioned before we jumped on, had a bit of a stint in NISA myself, and I was in charge of marketing and trying to drive those kind of similar sales. What were the key ingredients that happened before a ball was ever kicked that allowed you to sell out a crowd every single week in that first season?
Yeah, we have this incredible brand that really came from a process of working with the community. And our CMO and one of our co-founders, Idris Agandawal, really has an eye for and an ear for how do you build something that resonates with the community. And he has ideas, but I think the magic of the secret sauce was bringing others along in that creative process. And so I think that was really one of the core elements of what led to the excitement, was building a brand and then finding a partner to bring that out into Oakland. And so we did a t-shirt launch party, and we involved a local retailer, Oaklandish, who was able to host that party for us and bring the gear into the community to the point where you could see it being worn in and around Oakland. So I think that was one piece. The second piece was going out and having conversations with folks, not just in the soccer community, but in the nonprofit community, the creative community, the social impact community. And Mike Geddes, who, again, one of the founding team members, had been a BBC soccer reporter and had evolved to think about large scale events connected to large scale sporting events. World Cup in South Africa is a classic example where he said, let's use this moment in time, this celebration, to leave a lasting legacy in South Africa. And so I think Mike brought that spirit to what we were doing in the early days, and continuously asking, are we doing enough in the town? And so I think those two pieces of secret sauce, which, again, you can read it and see it on the website, you can hear it when you talk to anyone on the team, those have been constants from day one. And I think to bring out a fan base, the fan base needs to know that you exist. They have to believe that they personally can see themselves in that brand and see themselves enjoying that experience. And then they can see that if they're a soccer fan, fantastic. But if they're not a soccer fan, am I coming out to support something that I can believe in? And I think we saw a lot of fans in the stands. I spoke to, this is their first professional soccer match. It was something where they brought the whole family to it. It was 20 somethings coming out with friends for a birthday party, and I really enjoying the atmosphere of those block parties that we put on with music and the vibes, and downtown Oakland, right there, between Lake Merritt and the Laney College site. That was really unique, and word spread. So the first game was amazing, and people told their friends and loved ones about it, and they came out for the next game, and that continued throughout the fall of 2019. So it was an intentional set of steps. But I can tell you that a couple of weeks before that first game, the biggest fear we all had was, what if we play this game and there's like 5 people in the stands, and you just don't know. And so as the date got closer and closer, we started to ask the question, how many people can we fit in the stadium? And so you get to feel a little more comfortable. But that is a big leap of faith that you take when you get ready to launch a new team with no history.
Yeah, definitely. And on that note of the unknown, of that's one example of an unknown, of how many people are going to show up. Even sometimes they buy tickets and they're still not there. I think business in general, of course, is a bit of a world of unknown unknowns until you know them. But sports is a whole different beast, because it's, and I'm sure you can resonate with the idea of, when you're a GoDaddy and the chief product officer, the product is GoDaddy and what you're selling. Whereas now the product is, again, 11 players on a pitch and everyone around that. What have been some of those other bigger scale just unknowns that you didn't anticipate at the beginning, that you've come across that have been challenging and maybe have stopped the club in their tracks or have been able to overcome?
Yeah. Well, again, if we rewind the clock to the summer of 2019, we weren't certain when we were going to actually start playing. Like there was a lot of uncertainty. Was the league going to start that fall? Was it going to get sanctioned? Were these league games, exhibitions? Like it was not until very, very late in the summer that, frankly, we knew there were going to be games. And so, one of the early questions was, well, how do you take a team from no players to a group of players and a coach and a staff around that person who can help you get up and running? So we were very fortunate early on to bring on board on the soccer side Eric Yamamoto, who has a long history in the Bay Area on the men's and the women's side in soccer, and so he reached into his Rolodex and we started to talk about coach names. And then Paul Bravo came onto the project for that first season, and then players that had been in the woodwork that they both knew started to come out and say, "Oh, you've got Yamo and Paul involved in this project. You know, we love to show up." And so that was an unknown unknown. Like, how do you go from no academy team, no developmental team, like literally not a single player on the roster, to assembling that first roster? So that's something that we've gotten more sophisticated in over time, and now feel really confident about how do you build a roster that is self-sustaining, that includes local talent. That was one of those early questions that we had to answer, like how much talent can we find as a local while still being competitive? And you just don't know that until you find out the real level of the league in which you're playing. So how do you go from 0 to 11, you might say, on the pitch, and how do you bring a staff together? So that was one unknown. I mentioned this earlier, but they need a place to practice. Like the office for the players, as you all know, is the pitch in the locker room, and it was unclear where we would put everybody, and so a lot of scouring the area to find suitable location for a place to play every day that could be called our own. There's a dearth of places to play for youth teams, let alone professional teams, and so that answer has also gotten more sophisticated over time, from playing at the College of Alameda pitch early on in those practices, to going out to Las Positas College, and then winding up at the practice facility we now have in Harbor Bay in Alameda that used to house the Oakland Raiders. And that's a world-class facility. So to go from a place that we were able to turn into a practice facility to one that was custom built for an NFL team is a pretty remarkable rise over a few years. There was no way you could have predicted that. When we got up and running, the game day venue, again, when you start out and you literally scour the entire Oakland area, and then you go out to the East Bay, and you're like, where can you play a professional game that meets the pro league standards? And you start to look at 5,000 seats and lights and 72-yard wide, 110 plus long that doesn't have lines on it, and you come up with a null set, like literally not a single place to play. And so we made the decision pretty early on to find a way to manufacture a field out of the components that we knew we had, which is how we wound up at Laney College. So everything except for the pitch. And we figured out a way, in a very painful, both from a labor perspective, a risk perspective, building a field for every game, can create real complications. And then, of course, the financial investment in doing that was hard. So those are soccer related. And then we go to the non-soccer stuff. I don't know if you guys have any questions on that before I jump to the non-soccer side.
No, go ahead.
And again, I think, Matt, you may have encountered this with some of the work you try to do with Bay Cities. How much do you charge for a ticket? What are sponsors buying into before you've had a chance to show that there are fans online, in the stands, a following that you can then turn around and tell a sponsor, this is the value we can bring to you. So there's a real leap of faith, of evangelical conversation to be had with the fans, but also the sponsors early on in how you build the club's revenue base. I think maybe the last piece to talk about in unknown unknowns is, I think as we've gotten more sophisticated, as the leagues that we've played in now with the USL Championship level on the men, the USLW, for the Soul, the women, and soon to be the USL Super League, you're not only competing with these other teams on the field, but you're cooperating with those teams off the field to build one another's business. And I think that was a really exciting and unexpected virtue of being part of professional sports. I'd come out of an environment where, my competitors were always competitors. I mean, I might know people socially at other companies, but if I was building software or services or hardware and I had someone else that was competing with me, we competed in almost every situation. There was almost never a time when you were cooperating. And so this was very different. Yes, we want our teams to win. We want to bring home trophies, but we're actually trying to help every other team in the league do better. We want more people to watch their games. We want more people to know their players, because that way when we play each other, it's more interesting, more exciting, more fans show up, and that's good for everyone. So that was a real surprise to me, and a delightful surprise to see that people were really willing to put their hands out and help us learn, and we in the same do help others.
That's great. That's actually something we spoke exactly to Jed Matty of the Earthquakes about, was, is there any kind of collaboration amongst the MLS clubs of how to build each other from a front office standpoint? Because aside from places like New York and LA, you're not really competing geographically for fans / customers. The teams are competing on the field, but you don't have to worry about trying to capture the same audience as them. So what exactly does that look like in terms of how that collaboration works and the kind of things that you're speaking to one another about and giving advice on?
Yeah, I think it's everything from what's the best marketing idea that you've heard to bring people out to a game? What are the metrics in your social marketing that you track, and how do you turn followers into ticket buyers? Uh, on the marketing side, what are the biggest categories of sponsors across the league? And oh, we're missing that category. That's a very lucrative space. Let's go attract someone, maybe even from not just that same space, but maybe that same company has a branch or a related entity in our geographic region. Um, so there's a lot of commercial cooperation, an area that, again, may not seem so obvious at first, but thinking about player contracts and the standardization of player contracts as you work with the players union. What are the standards you want to uphold as a league to make your league known as a place that players want to come and play? How do you make sure there's a base level of compensation, of treatment, and standards around coaching? So I think that's quite important, again, on both the men's and the women's game, but in particular the women's game, given the history of the NWSL and women's soccer having lots of challenges behind the scenes. So I think we have endeavored to say, well, let's build standards in, and all agree as teams we're going to uphold those standards from day one. Because if one team falls down in a standard, it's going to reflect badly upon all of us. Also thinking about player transfers. So when you develop a player, that player should have a market value that you can test in the market. And you don't want another team in your league selling a player at roughly the same level of skill or experience for below market, because that brings the comparables down for everybody. So, hey, let's figure out what data is out there around the value of players and how might that value be upheld. Like, don't give away a player for free. Don't do a bad deal. We're not in there negotiating with other teams. They have to do their own negotiations, but be thoughtful about, if you make a decision, it's not just impacting your team, it's impacting all the other teams around you, and they'd want us to do the same. Similarly, when you think about what do you do to grow the game? So again, there are distribution rights related to media. So you have national deals, like the USL has a deal with CBS and a deal with ESPN Plus and ESPN itself. But locally, we have the rights, in our case, with KTVU here in the Bay Area. And we want all of our games broadcast. We want them to look great. So when we're at an away game, and that feed is coming from the away team. Boy, we want that feed to look great because our fans are watching that feed, and vice versa. When folks have an away game at our venue and we're sending the feed to them and they're putting that broadcast out there, boy, you want that to have the highest possible standard for those fans, because you want them to watch and go, wow, I'm really proud of my team. I'm really excited to see what those fans are doing. I want to do better than that locally. So really, in almost every aspect of how we run the club, we try to look at best practices that we can learn from others in our league. And we hope that when we call them and ask, how did you do that? That they share, and they do. And we return the courtesy as well.
That's really good. That's that, to your point of, you don't get that in any other industry. Again, you're not going to be going to a competitor where, again, you are fighting for the same customer base and ask how did they get customers. So that is really good to hear that, in what is very much a cutthroat industry in many ways, that there is that cross collaboration between, essentially competing organizations in a different way.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah. And maybe one more example, Matt. It's interesting just to think about it at a very, very detailed level. So if we go to visit another team, and they set up a training pitch for us, right, the day before the game. So we show up, we travel to the East Coast. So we come in 2 days before, perhaps. Like, boy, we really want that training pitch to be high quality. And why would that local team go find a high quality training pitch for us? Theoretically, they want to beat us on the field. So, well, do they really need to do that? The answer is yes, because when they come to us, they want us to return that same favor to them and give them a high quality experience. So, really at almost every level, you want a fair, even playing field, and you also want the reciprocity of the actions that teams treat you with to be obviously turned around in kind when they are looking to you to do the same thing. So it's literally at almost every level. Like, you could get a sporting advantage, but boy, then what happens on the other end of the equation? So anyway, I just wanted to throw that additional example in there. It literally impacts decision making, in almost every facet of the organization.
I think that is a fundamental difference to kind of the English soccer landscape of, again, they are fighting geographically for fans and customers and everything, but you hear the horror stories of what an away changing room looks like. Even in the Premier League sometimes, especially, a decade or two ago of, you think of like Vinnie Jones's era of soccer. You hear some horror stories of what the away team comes across. But I know you had mentioned the women's side. And so, of course, in 2022, Oakland Soul was launched. Can you chat to us about, was there always the idea from the very beginning to launch the women's side? And then how did launching the women's side and kind of growing it from the ground up differ to the men's?
Yes, it had always been in the business plan from day one to have a men's and women's professional team. The concept around the club's founding was the values demanded it. Like, we thought it was a good idea in general to tap into the incredible talent pool that we have in women's soccer in the Bay Area and in the US in general. But in particular, we thought, we are so focused on equity, and early on the concepts were around anti-racism and gender equity. And those two things demanded a women's team, not just a women's team, but a high quality program that attracted men and women at all positions in the club. And Lindsay Barons, who is the president of the club, was in a position that not many women get to hold, or Jordan Farrell, or TD, who is a Black man, who, again, there are not many of them in coaching or TD/GM spots. So we from an early day say, we're going to work really, really hard to make decisions based on talent and capacity and equity, and therefore you need to have a women's team. So it's been in the plan from day one. The question that we kept wrestling with was, are we ready? Like, do we have a place for them to practice? Do we have a place for them to play? Do we have the resources to put a team on the field? Is there a league we feel good about? that we can launch a team in on the women's side. And so we joined the USL Championship, announced that in 2020 on the men's side, started playing in 21. And the USL started to talk about the USLW launching soon after. And so that got us to a point where we then hired someone onto the team to build the plan from, again, very similar to how we started with the Roots. We have an idea on paper. Now you got to build a plan to get from there to launch. And so we hired a person, Jenna, to come in and take the idea from on paper to how do we bring that team to life. So very, very similar work building the Soul branding that we did for the Roots branding. In fact, identical levels of effort, community engagement, multiple rounds of design to come up with a sibling crest, right? It's not better than, or it's not below or above. They're equal in what we think of as the brand hierarchy. You get the Soul and the Roots next to one another. They connect with the colors, and yet they're also both distinct. So we started with the brand identity and what are the values of that brand. How do we then begin in 22 is when we launched the brand itself, as you just talked about. We had a great coming out party, you might say, and celebrated that we'd then be launching the team in 2023. And again, similar process, find a coach. How do you cold start a program without an academy? Where do you find players? And we were very fortunate that the coaching staff, again, partnered with Eric Yamamoto. And by this point, Jordan Farrell, who'd been on as GM for quite some time, or TD for quite some time, building out the soccer network to bring quality players in from the youth all the way up to folks who had played in World Cups on the women's side. So that was super exciting. Then we needed to find a place for them to play. Luckily, we had practice sorted out. We were able to use the same facilities that the men used at the Alameda practice site, which was fantastic, and it's world class. And I have to say, when the women showed up for that first practice, it was jaw dropping to see the type of investment we were making in the facility for them, in the coaching staff for them, and it showed on the pitch. So again, we use many of the same parts of the playbook to go from concept to reality for the Soul, and it showed up in the results. It showed up in on the pitch, results on the pitch, and it showed up in results in the stands, where we sold out literally every single Soul match, and that was something special to have both a doubleheader with, I can't remember the exact number, something over 5,000 fans at Cal State East Bay. We didn't have enough dates on the calendar to bring the other games there, so we played at Merritt College and filled the stands there for the rest of the home matches, and culminating with a win on the last day of the season that allowed us to qualify for the playoffs. And that was awesome. It was really a magical first season on the pitch.
It sounds like from the very beginning, so much has stemmed from this drive for gender and racial justice. And obviously a big thing that has now come around is the Oakland Roots Justice Fund as well. So would you mind just chatting to us about the decision to set that up and kind of what the fund has been able to do so far?
Yeah, thank you for asking about that. When we first got started, one of the things we did early on was we joined Common Goal. And I think we are still the only pro team in the US to be a member of Common Goal. And the idea there was to put our money where our mouth was. Like, let's take a percentage of our revenues and pledge it back to what for us was an important cause, anti-racism. You can do it for any nonprofit cause, for Common Goal in general. But we said, hey, this is something really important to our fan base, really important to our brand. And at the time, Common Goal did not have a program around anti-racism. So we said, let's take those first few seasons capital that we created and catalyze a program to bring coaches and front office staff from youth all the way up through professional ranks, to bring them through an inclusive training experience. And it's called Switch the Pitch. It's been really embraced by folks across MLS and WSL, the American Outlaws, youth teams. Like, it's been really fun to see that kernel of an idea turn into something as impactful as that, not just locally, but nationally. We've also done work as we've raised more funds into the Justice Fund to bring coaching into Oakland in ways that are allowing more kids to have local coaches who are going to inspire them, push them, and not just coach the technical skills, but really coach all elements of being a young person and what you look to in a mentor. So we've trained, I think at this point, a few hundred. I'm going to get that number roughly right. I'm not quite sure where we are this year yet, but we did, I think, 100 2 years ago, 100 again last year in that ballpark with our partners at the Coaching Core / Positive Coaching Alliance to bring more coaches into the Oakland area and give teams well-equipped coaches to handle what can be difficult moments and learning moments on the field and in training. We've done work with a number of women's organizations, a number of LGBTQ plus organizations. We've been in the schools in OUSD and the Oakland Unified School District. We've done works with Oakland Parks and Rec. And so I feel really good about the hours we put in on the ground with young people. I feel good about the environmental impact we've had from tree planting campaigns we've done on our own and with a sponsor, with Ava Energy, East Bay Community Energy, as it used to be known. And Anthem, who's one of our main sponsors, has helped us do this incredible program every year in partnership with Street Soccer USA to bring teams from all corners of Oakland, Northeast, West Oakland, to the Dia de los Muertos festival and do a big tournament where thousands of people come watch youth through the politicians in some cases play matches to win a cup in the Street Soccer Cup in Oakland. So I'm really tickled by the idea that we had early on and then making it real on the ground in Oakland. And that's a unique piece of what we do. And it's not a separate, interestingly, we do have a foundation, which is important, the Roots and Soul Foundation, but actually the ethos of that impact work actually is in every decision that we make in the club. A quick example with that is, who do we bring in as food vendors at games? Well, it's local food trucks. And this year we have two players who teamed up to create an African food tent from their native countries. And so it permeates all of the decisions we try to make as a club, the idea that we are here to make a positive impact and honor the legacy of social activism and justice that Oakland, and I think generally that message resonates with the fans who show up who maybe didn't know that they were walking into a soccer match and they said, I want to come hear what all the buzz is about. And those who come in and want to watch the soccer and then get infected by this idea that this team is something bigger than just what you see on the pitch.
I think the club's ability to really foster community in a way, to your point that the soccer is just happening, it's just a thing that happens to be going on, that all of these people are around. I think it probably is somewhere, or it should at least be a case study for how to grow an organization from the ground up. But I'm curious to know if there's any pre-existing sports organizations or anything similar that you looked at as a bit of a model or an example of, from day one, what you want to do, but how do we connect the dots? And is there anyone that has done that before us?
Yeah, we looked and we didn't find any organizations in the US that we could model after. There was no purpose-driven professional team that was built anywhere in the US that we could find. And so we tried to find models of ownership that were like ours, and we can talk a bit about the community round that we did last year. We couldn't find any models for that. So we generally took pieces and parts from teams that we saw around the world. And so one team that's been very purpose-driven has been St. Pauli in Germany. They've been exceptionally purpose-focused from an early part of their club. So that was one place that we drew inspiration. We thought about the Green Bay Packers, interestingly, as a model of a community-centric organization. Like, you wouldn't pick up the Green Bay Packers stadium and put it into a larger town. It'd be antithetical to the brand. And so they have survived and thrived, in Wisconsin, in frankly a very small town, because they have been so true to the local community, and that local community supports them, and then that brings in love from people, far beyond the borders of Green Bay, Wisconsin. So we looked to those institutions. Then we also looked to the Basque Country and what Athletic Bilbao had done to build their players from that particular region. And so that was an interesting concept because, again, when we started to think about how do we build for the long term, like decades from now, can you field a team that is comprised of, I don't know if it's all of the players, but lots of players that came up in your local geography, so they don't have to go to another state. They don't have to go abroad to play quality soccer at the highest level. And yes, maybe they get to be so good that they should be going to another place to really pursue the top level of their talent. But how do we keep the rest of the talent here and give them a pathway on both the men's and the women's side to stay local? So those are three things that we talked about quite a bit in the early days. St. Pauli, Packers, and the folks at Atletico Bilbao. So those were interesting opportunities for us to learn from. And then we had to build a model that worked in the US, in Oakland, that would be a big tent, inclusive. So yeah, there's Oakland in the brand, but we want everyone to feel welcome when they showed up. And so again, that was a build it from scratch type model. Like, we want to be open and welcoming to anyone, whether you were born in Oakland, live in Oakland. If you live these values, we want you to be a fan of this team. And I think maybe the last piece on this was we also looked not so much on the community side of things, but we looked at how pro sports and entertainment and music were colliding as well, and fashion. And so we looked to bring in people who were connected to Oakland, but maybe didn't have a connection to soccer specifically. And that brought on Marshawn Lynch and G-Eazy, and then Billy Joe Armstrong, and then Jason Kidd. And so those and the community around, again, maybe I'll stop on this answer, we come back to that, but those folks joined us because of the connection we had to the local community. And yes, over time, their investment hopefully will be worth more down the road, but they took a real leap of faith that this was a worthy project to be involved in today.
Yeah, that's awesome. And on the note of names like that coming into the ownership group, before and during the community investment round, which we will get to next, aside from that financial injection of cash that these investors have brought, what has their names being attached to the organization done for the club?
Yeah, it's been really fun to have those types of creative talents around the table and ask, okay, what do you care about? What are you passionate about? How might we weave that into what we're doing and put it in front of fans in person or on social media? And so, one very crystal clear example was, the season that G-Eazy invested in the club. He teamed up with the Oakland Youth Symphony and did a set before one of our games at home. That was magical. Like, he is a pop star. Bringing the Oakland Youth Symphony together with him was an amazing moment, and a moment those artists will remember forever. Those young people, G-Eazy will remember forever. And I think those types of things that bring their unique talents to life, connected to the club. Like, we think of our game days as a fun, huge block party that everyone should go away with smiling, hopefully a bigger smile when we win, but they should enjoy the game and the experience along the way. And so that I think is a real example of taking someone's talent and bringing it to life. Marshawn has mentioned us on various podcasts and interviews he's done from time to time about the impact we're having in his town and in his neighborhood. And so having him talk about us when he's out there doing whatever he's doing on ESPN or other platforms he's involved with has spread the brand quite a bit. And then the validation it gives to others who can look and say, I'm interested in the Oakland Roots. Oh, if that person has attached their brand to this, I'm going to take a second look, and it allows people like ESPN and magazines that might not otherwise cover sport, give us coverage. And so those are things that we are hopeful continue to happen. And just today, I got a picture from a friend. I guess last night, Green Day did a concert down in Anaheim, and Billy Joe Armstrong, who's one of the founding members and a singer for Green Day, lives in Oakland. At the concert, he draped a huge Oakland Roots flag over, I think, one of their amplifiers, and it got tweeted. People are blowing up on socials about it, and that's the type of thing where people are like, "What is that? And why is it up there?" And then they go look up the story, and those things just grow the brand. We want to be, a global brand. We want a brand that transcends sport, that brings these components of culture together, that represent the best of Oakland and tell that positive story to the world. We want the world to fall in love with Oakland, and you don't have to live here to do that. And so those brand ambassadors help us carry that love out into the world.
That's amazing, and the fact that no one's telling these people to do any of this, and I know I remember seeing a photo of Damian Lillard, who is of course from Oakland, just wearing a shirt. Maybe there was something behind the scenes of giving him a shirt and asking him, but I would guess not, just because of
he's from the town, from deep east, and Jason Kidd as well was wearing stuff. We saw a shot a couple weeks ago. Draymond Green's kid was wearing an Oakland Roots jersey as Draymond was doing a Warriors interview post game. Like that stuff just happens, and that's one of the beauties of building a brand that is out in the community, that people appreciate the design, then they appreciate what it stands for, and then they want to be associated with those positive elements of diversity and inclusion and innovation and social impact and positivity. So those things on the Roots and the Soul side are they're magic. I mean, we've talked about that, like the magic of Oakland and the power of sport, and it truly is something that if you can capture it, people feel it, and obviously they can feel it when they're not at the games, but when we get someone to a game day, they really get a sense for how the crowd responds and interacts with one another. And it's something that we've heard over and over and over again is truly a world-class experience that we're creating essentially out of whole cloth. And we're playing in stadiums that were not built for the types of things we're doing. And yet people are having these magical experiences.
I think, as we mentioned before, now I haven't been, I live close enough, too close that I should have been, but on the point of the community investment round, I haven't been to a game, but I am one of the over 5,000 people that chip some money in.
Woo-hoo.
And
good job.
Again, it's not even a matter of I want to put this money in, albeit not a huge amount of money, but some money. It wasn't about I want to put this money in so that the team is better on the pitch. It's I have seen what the club is doing off the pitch, which is what I am more interested in as someone who has not been to a game, and knowing that the money is going in any way to funding the operation that goes behind all of that work. So massive kudos to everything that has been built that has attracted that kind of interest from people who, like myself, haven't even been to a game. But on the note of the community investment round, I know there was over 5,000 people involved and bringing in a combined over $3.1 million, I believe.
That was amazing.
Can you chat to us exactly through that process and what really that meant for the club and what it meant for the community to have so much trust in what everyone in the club is doing, to be handed that money and be trusted to use it for good?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. When you have a group of investors who say, yes, I want to be associated with this. I want to put on my social profile, well, I'm an investor, I'm an owner in the club. They write a check no matter the size. Like, people can use that money for other things. So for us, the fact that so many folks did, that so many people were local that did, was a moment of pride, and frankly, a hugely humbling moment of responsibility, and thinking, wow, these folks have made a decision that they believe in all of the values we've talked about. They believe in the future of this club, and they're willing to put their own capital behind it. And so we had been talking about, similar to when we first started the club, we thought about the men's and the women's team as part of the long-term strategy for where we wanted to go. We had thought about some sort of community ownership in the club. We needed to balance asking the community for their participation with building enough trust so that people would say yes. And so we really wanted to wait until we felt like we had shown time and time and time again that we would be responsible stewards for the brand, for people who would then, when we asked, would you participate, they would willingly say yes. It wasn't a hard sell. It was, look, here is the story. Here's how we're doing. Here are the things that are going well. Here are things that we're worried about. And that people would respond because they knew that we had overcome adversity, that we had time and time again made good decisions, made the best decision we could in the face of challenges, whether it was COVID, whether it was changing leagues, whether it was having to part ways with players or coaches. So I think the storytelling was really important to be able to be at a point in our journey where we could show what had happened and show what was to come. Having names already involved that were almost stamps of approval were important. And then making it so that $100 was the way that you could make it accessible. And obviously that's still a lot of money, but that is for investors who were unaccredited or not accredited in a very technical term. And sports teams in the US, that just never happens. Like, to have equity ownership in a team requires someone to have a tremendous amount of capital and therefore a limited participation to a very small number of people. And we felt it was so important to not just have fans feel like they're owners and co-creators of the brand in a kind of a broad sense, but actual ownership. Like, this is equity that I have in the team, and so as the team does well, I do well. So we felt that all those things were coming together, and that we were at a spot where the campaign would do well. We didn't know how well it would do. It's a little bit like when you play that first game and you're not sure how many people are going to show up, but you do all the things you can think of to make it a positive experience. And we were blown away. We were just blown away by that first day. I think we raised $1 million. By the second day, we were at 1.5 million. We were 3 days in, we were 2 million plus, and the numbers every day. You'd look at the dashboard, you'd be like, oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. And then more names of athletes and celebrities and people who were dear to Oakland came in to join us, previous mayors. It was amazing. And so I feel very, very responsible and very, very humbled by that reaction. And the whole staff was really in tears. Like, at the end of that first day, the emotions of seeing the community come out to support us were overwhelming. And every time we've asked for help, and we don't do it that often, but a week ago we sent out a note saying there's going to be an important vote about the opportunity for us to play in the Coliseum, which would give us a much larger venue and bring even more members of the community to a match, and bring the stadium back into Oakland near public transport, lots of parking, bring everyone from the East Bay to be able to fit inside that stadium. That call for help was answered, and we had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people send emails, make phone calls, show up at the meeting. So that type of support makes it so that the mayor then shows up in person to say, we want this to happen, and then the vote is completely unanimous in our favor. So those types of things now are possible. They were probably possible before, but now you have a stake as a fan in the team, and I think that makes people even more committed to seeing us be successful.
One of the things I was going to ask about was obviously either earlier this week or last week was when you guys kind of announced the project with the Coliseum. I believe that's in 2025, correct?
Correct. That's right.
And I know last year, you guys had already announced that you were looking to build a soccer specific stadium at the Malibu lot in and around the Coliseum. So what does this kind of mean for that project? Are you guys still going forward with that, or does that even change the
Yeah,
plans?
no, it's great. So it gives us a bridge from here to the future Malibu site, having the Coliseum. And again, there's still work to be done. So the vote was, the JPA commission asked the director of the JPA and the staff and the folks at ASM, which operates the Coliseum, to finish a deal with us so that we have the ability to understand all the economics and all the operational details. And I think we're pretty close, but that needs to get done. Uh, so that's super exciting and allows us time to continue to work through the planning process. The Malibu site is an unimproved, no infrastructure parking lot, barely, that's not flat. Like there's all sorts of stuff that has to happen there. So it gives us time to make sure that that site can be ready for when we need it. So I'm excited about the Coliseum, and we're delighted that that vote was a very public affirmation of a reuse of an iconic structure. And so there's more work to be done. We hope to officially announce that sometime down the road. And then we'll be able to make the plans even more clear to folks what will be happening next and what's after.
Awesome. And then, as you guys have kind of talked about throughout the entire recording so far, the community is so important to you guys. And as you said earlier, you guys want to become a global brand. What does the club look like as the community continues to grow?
Yeah, it's a really fun exercise to project, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. And the types of things that we think about are being an anchor institution in Oakland. And what does that mean? It means that games are consistently sold out. It means that when folks are going into the schools or they're talking to community members, there's been some impact that the Roots and the Soul have had, on those students, on those teachers, on the safe places to play that are in these neighborhoods. It means that we've been able to catalyze people from all geographies in and around Oakland and the East Bay have met people they didn't know before and had a magical time rooting for their favorite team. So I think those are local impacts that we can have, and all of that will stimulate the local economy. Like thinking about the number of Soul games and Roots games in downtown Oakland, that's just today it would be almost 40 nights a year between those two teams alone. And on top of that, we want to do other events at a place like Malibu. So that's a huge employment opportunity. And if we can be a World Cup site during the 26 Men's World Cup and knock on wood the 27 Women's World Cup, assuming that comes to the US, and bring national teams to train at our facility for those periods of time, like every one of those things is an investment back into Oakland and the community. And then I think about the brand and the music and the traditions and the entertainment value that comes from both what we're doing and the players that I think will begin to develop and play roles, hopefully in national teams, and then perhaps we'll get to go abroad. And we had two players last summer who had played for us briefly and then transferred over to Germany. So building the brand globally, and we've heard folks in London and in Berlin and where else we've seen folks wearing gear, like they show up in magical places. Jamaica, there was a root sticker somewhere. People send us these pictures. And so I think the goal will be to have the Roots and Soul be a brand that people want to follow, both because of what it means, because of the championships that we win, and because they want to tell their friends and their family with pride, hey, I'm a member of that fan club. And so that's really where we're going. And every year we hope to be a little bit better than we were the year before.
Awesome. I want to, before we get into wrapping things up, there was one other sort of process oriented question I wanted to ask you about, and that was the move from NISA to USL Championship. And I think from the general public's understanding of changing leagues, it's just once you have enough money, you move upwards. But I know that there is much more to it than just that. So could you walk us through quickly what that looked like from a process of, okay, we're leaving this league and we're going to this upper one?
Yeah, so we'll rewind the clock. So we had played in the fall of 2019 and in the fall tournament. NISA was really not up and running yet. It was sanctioned sometime, I think, in the fall of 2019. I don't remember the exact date, but sanctioned around then as a Division III league. And the intent was for the league to play its first full season in 2020. That was a challenge, as y'all remember. We played a home game on February 29th, 2020, heard rumblings about this virus coming. We played our next game with many fewer fans the next weekend, and then the NBA shut down, and then everyone went home. And so we were trying to sort out, how do we keep players safe? How do we keep our staff employed when no revenue was coming in? It was unclear when folks were going to come back, but it started to look more and more dire. And over the summer, one of the things that was happening while we were trying to figure out how do we live up to our values, respond to George Floyd's murder with the appropriate level of internal and external conversation about race relations in the US at the time, I noticed that the owner of the USL Championship franchise in the Bay Area had a project stop and does a lot of real estate. And so we put in a note and said, hey, we're interested. We've got a team. You have a franchise and no team. Maybe this is an opportunity for us to move up divisions. And so we began a conversation in the summer of 2020. First, could we join the league? Would the league accept us? Were the terms of the acquisition of that license fair to everyone? And once we sorted that out, then the conversation was back to NISA, like, hey, we have this opportunity to move up. Let's sort out what that means for our relationship with NISA. And we think quite a lot about our legacy. And so we weren't just going to walk out of the league. We were going to help make sure, to the best of our ability, and again, hopefully in a fair way, we were going to leave the league in a position that was better than when we found it. And so it was negotiating our way into the USL and negotiating our way out of NISA. And by the end of the summer, we'd sorted that out and then announced, I believe in September of 2020, that we were going to be playing in the USL Championship the following season, even though none of us really knew quite what that meant yet, because we were still in the midst of a global pandemic that was decimating live sports. So we took a big leap of faith, and I think it's worked out.
Definitely has worked out. And what has the difference of being in the USL Championship made versus being a tier down in the pyramid when it comes to things like attracting bigger sponsorships, broadcast deals, being able to grow the business side? Because being in that league brings more expenses, but how has the club been able to grow the revenue alongside that?
Yeah, so USL obviously has been around much longer than NISA has. So you have an instant stability component, and they have a large front office that's staffed appropriately for operations and standards and ensuring that you have, in our case, USL Championship, and then League One, and then League Two, and now on the women's side, USLW and Super League. And so you had the staffing and resources required to run a professional league, and the staffing and resources needed to broadcast that league nationally. And so they had built a really wonderful media distribution team that allowed for games to be seen on multiple channels globally at the same time. So it meant much more visibility, which meant more sponsors, more dollars for the team. And then, on very practical things, when we were playing in NISA, we couldn't get international players visas. The league had yet to meet the standard for the special purpose visas required to bring in professional players. When we got into the USL Championship, that was not an issue. It was very clear that the players in the league met those standards. And that was really important. You're limited to the number of international slots, so there are spaces for local players, but it instantly allowed us to recruit players globally, and we knew that those players could come play for us. So it was everything from those little things that make the quality of the game better to the macro things like, how does the game show up on TV?
Awesome. That's great. Well, I think we're about time, but we've made it a bit of a tradition to ask a few sort of quicker fire questions to finish us off. So first one, and this will be for anyone who's in the Bay Area that will take a bit of a recommendation from you. What are your go-to restaurants in Oakland as well as outside of Oakland in the Bay Area?
Wow. Holy Toledo. In Oakland, there's Nido's Backyard, which is down near the Jack London Square, and it's a beautiful spot. It's outdoor Mexican food, fantastic drinks, and it's very casual, and it's a lovely spot. So I'd probably put that one towards the top of my list, and it's affordable, and folks can go there. There are a bunch of food trucks that come to our games, but I'm not quite sure where you can go find them in the world. So I'm not sure I can list those off when they're not at our games. Yeah, maybe I'll stay with Nido's, and then we'll go to your second rapid fire.
Sounds good. Next one, if you could pinpoint one single favorite moment in the Roots' journey so far, what would that be?
I think that the first goal that was scored for the Roots back in 2019, that roar of the crowd was incredible. The energy, the roof came off the stadium, and it was really a wow. We have a soccer game. We can put the ball in the net. The crowd understands to respond, and this is going to be amazing. So that was a magical moment.
Awesome. I'm sure it was. And finally, the last one. What is the one thing you're most looking forward to for the rest of 2024?
Oh, let's see. Well, if I could dream a little bit, I think the equally important to me would be both the men's team and the women's team, so the Roots and the Soul, both qualify for home playoff games. We have yet to have a home playoff game for either one of our teams. And so I would love for home playoff games, the fans to experience that for both the Roots and the Soul. Again, we can't promise that, but that would be a spectacular moment in the club's history, another step forward in our technical progression, and a way to reward the fans for how much work they've put into following us.
Great. Yeah. And fingers crossed both of those happen for both teams. I think that is about it. I think we have gotten more than what we were expecting today. Thank you again so much, Steven. It's been great.
Thanks, y'all.
Thanks for watching this episode of Off the Pitch. Don't forget to drop a follow or subscribe on the podcast platform you're listening from. That helps us bring stories like these to your ears each and every week. And if you have a minute, leave a review as well, as that helps us grow the Off the Pitch community and bring even more exciting guests on. See you in the next one.